I spent over $9,000 on a trip to Spain. 10 days, boutique hotels, private boat tours, the best beaches in the Mediterranean. This was supposed to be the greatest vacation of our lives. Instead, I sat on a sun lounger under the blazing Spanish sun and watched my fiancée exchange phone numbers with a stranger, 6 feet away from me, with an $11,000 engagement ring on her finger. And you know what the worst part was? She didn't even try to hide it. My friends later told me I overreacted, that I was jealous and paranoid, that I threw away a 3-year relationship over what they called harmless vacation flirting. But they weren't there. They didn't see what I saw. Today, I'm going to tell you the whole story, from the very first day to the very last. And you can decide for yourself whether I made the right call or whether I burned it all down for nothing. But before I get into it, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. Every week I post real stories about relationships, betrayal, and the moments that change everything. And if this story hits you even half as hard as it hit me, drop a like. It takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps this channel grow so I can keep sharing stories like this one. All right, let's go back to Spain. We met 3.5 years before any of this happened. Mutual friend, rooftop party, late August in the city. I showed up with zero expectations, just a night out, nothing more. But the moment I saw her, something in my head just clicked. We talked for 4 hours straight, about everything, work, ambitions, where we wanted to be in 10 years. She laughed at my jokes like I was actually funny. By the end of that night, I already knew she wasn't just another person I'd met at a party. The first year was everything people talk about when they talk about falling in love. Random weekday concerts, cooking together at midnight, exploring our own city like we were tourists. A year in, I asked her to move in. She said yes immediately. I was working as a management consultant, around $125,000 a year, plus bonuses. She was a marketing coordinator, making about $58,000. Because of that gap, I naturally became the one who covered more. Vacations, dinners, most of our shared expenses. Not because of ego, it just made sense, and she never pushed back on it. 3 years in, I decided to propose. I spent 2 months picking out the ring, a cushion-cut diamond in a white gold setting, $11,200. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted her to look at it and know that I had thought about every single detail. She said yes before I even finished the question. For the next several months, our entire world revolved around 2 things: planning the wedding and planning the trip. This trip, 10 days in Spain, was supposed to be our engagement celebration. We'd been talking about it for almost a year. I booked everything myself. A boutique hotel in Barcelona's Gothic quarter, a beachfront rental in Ibiza, private sailing tours, restaurants worth remembering. The total came to just over $9,400. Every cent of it was mine. I wanted her to enjoy every moment without once looking at a price tag. I wanted to give her the trip she'd always dreamed about. If I had known then what I know now. The first 3 days in Barcelona were genuinely incredible. We walked the Gothic quarter for hours, ate gelato on narrow cobblestone streets, watched the sun drop behind the city from the hill at Montjuic. She held my hand the way she used to when we first started dating. Easy, natural, without thinking about it. I honestly believed this trip was going to be everything I'd planned it to be. The first crack showed up on the fourth evening. We were at a rooftop bar, one of those places with a perfect view of the Sagrada Familia and the whole lit-up skyline. She went to order our second round of drinks while I held the table. I watched her from across the terrace. Not because I was suspicious, just because I was watching. She was standing at the bar, waiting, when a man stepped up beside her. Tanned, well-dressed, the kind of effortless confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. They talked for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 6, and I saw something I recognized immediately. She tilted her head slightly to the right, that small lean with a half smile that signals genuine interest. It was the exact same thing she used to do with me when we first started dating. When she came back to the table, I asked who he was. She waved it off, said he was just making conversation, said I was reading way too much into nothing. I let it go. I didn't want to be the jealous guy interrogating his fiancée over a 5-minute conversation with a stranger at a bar. But the feeling stayed, like a splinter somewhere deep that you can't see but can always feel. We spent one more day in Barcelona, then flew to Ibiza, second day on the island. Midday, a beach club on the southern coast. Rows of white sun lounges, loud electronic music, beautiful people from every corner of the world. I reserved 2 lounges near the pool and ordered a bottle of wine. We settled in. Everything felt perfect. About an hour later, she said she wanted to cool off in the pool. I stayed on the lounger with my book. The pool was directly in front of me. I could see her clearly from where I was sitting. And then he appeared. Late 20s, athletic build, deep tan. He positioned himself about 2 feet from her in the water. They started talking immediately. I watched the whole thing. The first few minutes could still have been just polite conversation. 2 strangers in a pool exchanging small talk. But then the body language shifted. She turned to face him fully, her back angled toward me like I wasn't even part of the geography. He said something, and she threw her head back and laughed, the kind of real, unguarded laugh she hadn't given me in months. Then he touched her arm, just above the elbow, that light squeeze people use when they're testing the waters. She didn't pull away. She didn't glance over at me to check if I was watching. She leaned closer. I put my book down. They stayed in that pool for close to 30 minutes. With every passing minute, the distance between them shrank, until their arms were touching beneath the surface of the water. Eventually, she climbed out and walked back to the lounger with the casual energy of someone who didn't think I'd noticed anything. Easy stride, slight smile. I asked who he was. She said she didn't catch his name, said he was just a tourist, giving her restaurant recommendations. Restaurant recommendations, 30 minutes, standing close enough that their skin was touching, while her fiancé sat 10 yards away, watching every second of it. I didn't push back. Some part of me was still desperately trying to believe her, but that part was getting smaller by the minute. About 2 hours after the pool, we were back on the lounges. She was lying on her stomach, phone propped in front of her, typing. There was a slight smile on her face, the kind you get when you're reading something you enjoy. I wouldn't have thought much of it. But then I noticed one small movement. She tilted the phone away from me, just slightly, just enough so I couldn't see the screen from my angle. It was a small adjustment, almost imperceptible, but I caught it because since the pool, I had been paying attention to everything. And then she did the thing that ended it all. She bit her bottom lip, reading a message, typed something back fast, and let out a quiet laugh that she clearly didn't intend for me to hear. I sat up, reached over, and took the phone out of her hand before she could react. She lunged for it immediately. People don't lunge for their phone when someone picks it up, not unless there's something on it they don't want seen. The screen was open on a messaging app. The conversation at the top was with a contact she'd saved less than 2 hours earlier. It was him, the guy from the pool. In the span of 90 minutes, they had built a conversation thread that made me feel like I'd been punched in the chest. He was telling her she was the most beautiful woman he'd seen on the island all summer. She responded with a laughing emoji, followed by "your trouble" and a winking face. He asked if she'd be at a specific club that night. She wrote back, "Maybe. Depends on what we end up doing." Another wink. Not, "I can't. I'm here with my fiancée." Not, "I'm engaged. It was nice meeting you." Just, maybe. While the man who put an $11,000 ring on her finger and spent over $9,000 to bring her to that island was lying on the lounger less than 3 feet away. I set the phone down between us on the lounger. Didn't say a word. She started talking immediately. Fast, the way people talk when they're trying to fill a silence before it becomes permanent. Told me it wasn't what it looked like. Said she was just being friendly. Said he was pushy and she didn't want to be rude. I looked at her once. Then I looked away. I didn't speak to her again for the rest of the afternoon. The silence I gave her over the next 3 days wasn't a punishment. It was the sound of something inside me shutting down. 3 full days left in Ibiza. Every single one was a masterclass in tension. She tried everything to pull me back in. Suggested restaurants. I said I wasn't hungry. Tried to take my hand. I moved it to my pocket. Brought up plans for the next day. I gave one-word answers, or nothing at all. On the 3rd morning, she sat on the edge of the bed and asked, "Are you going to say anything to me before we go home?" I told her I had nothing to say that would make either of us feel better, that I'd rather wait until we were home to have the conversation we both knew was coming. Her face changed. She understood in that moment that this wasn't a fight she could just wait out. The flight home was 6.5 hours sitting next to a complete stranger wearing the face of someone I used to love. We landed around 10 at night. Walked into the apartment. She dropped her bag by the door and turned to face me with her arms crossed. I said, "We need to talk." I kept it short. I told her that what I saw at the beach club and what I read on that phone wasn't something I could come back from. The flirting in the pool was already bad enough, but exchanging numbers with the stranger and carrying on a flirtatious conversation, planning to possibly meet him that same night, while I was lying right next to her. That was a level of disrespect I wasn't willing to negotiate with. And then I said the words that changed everything. "I want the engagement ring back." She exploded. Told me I was blowing everything out of proportion. That nothing happened. That flirting isn't cheating. That I was throwing away 3 years over my own insecurity. That I'd been looking for a reason to be upset ever since Barcelona. My response was simple. I didn't go looking for those messages. I took the phone because you tilted the screen away from me. She asked if I was seriously ending everything over a few text messages. I said, I'm ending it because you don't see anything wrong with what you did. That was the part that broke it for me, not the messages themselves, not the flirting. The fact that she was standing in our apartment, ring still on her finger, and telling me that my reaction was the problem. If I have to apologize for being hurt by what I watched with my own eyes, then there is nothing left to build a marriage on. She took the ring off that night and set it on the dresser without saying a word. She moved out over the following 2 weeks. After she left, I sat down and looked at the numbers. The trip, $9,400. The ring, I sold it through a consignment jeweler and got back $4,800, less than half of what I paid. That's a $6,400 loss on a piece of jewelry I spent 2 months choosing for a person who was texting another man while wearing it. Between the trip, the ring loss, and restructuring my entire living situation, the financial damage came to somewhere around $18,000. $18,000 for one lesson. For anyone wondering about the legal side, in most states, an engagement ring is treated as a conditional gift. The condition is that the marriage actually takes place. If the engagement ends, the ring typically goes back to the person who bought it, regardless of who called it off. She returned it voluntarily, but if she hadn't, I would have had legal grounds to demand it back. But here's what I want to say before I finish. The money wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was sitting on that plane, somewhere over the Atlantic, realizing that the person I fell in love with had become someone I didn't recognize. Maybe she changed. Maybe she was never quite who I thought she was. I still don't have the answer to that. I don't think she's a villain. But she was someone who didn't understand where the line was. Flirting at a rooftop bar in Barcelona was a yellow flag I chose to ignore. 30 minutes in a pool, arm to arm, with a stranger, that was a red flag I couldn't rationalize away. But exchanging numbers, building a flirtatious conversation, writing, "Maybe I'll see you tonight," while her engagement ring was catching sunlight on the same hand she was typing with. That wasn't a flag. That was the finish line. If you're in a relationship right now where your partner tells you that your discomfort with their behavior is your problem, that your boundaries are just insecurity, that your reaction to what you've seen with your own eyes is overdramatic, I want you to think very carefully about what that looks like 10 years from now, because the behavior doesn't stop just because you put a ring on it. I walked away from that relationship with a massive financial loss, but I also walked away with something money can't replace: the absolute certainty that I made the right call, and that certainty has been worth every single dollar I lost. If this story made you feel something, hit the like button. It genuinely makes a difference for this channel and helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Subscribe if you haven't already. New videos every week. And drop a comment below. Do you think he made the right call? Or did he overreact? I'll let you be the judge.